Let's have some fun in this lesson. There's a lot of great APIs out there, and one of them is Chuck Norris Jokes. So this is an API, it's got Chuck Norris jokes, and basically it gives you a random Chuck Norris fact, and these are the funny joke facts. So it also shows you, it's also an open API, so you can just simply connect to it and get a response. And in the response, you're going to get icon URL, so you're going to get an image, you're going to get an ID, you're going to get a URL for the joke, and you're also going to get a value, so that's going to be the joke. And this is the one that we're after within our application. So the objective of this lesson is to connect to this API and output that joke every time we click the trigger. So let's update this, get a joke. So this is JavaScript, an element, just a button. We haven't hooked up any of the JavaScript yet, and we've got an area to output our joke. So we're all ready. So let's set this up within JavaScript. So let's hook up our JavaScript now. First thing that we need to do is we need an event listener for our trigger. So let's set up a variable and we'll call it joke. We'll call it Joker because this is where all of the jokes are going to be happening. So document, and we'll use query selector in order to select our element, and the element that we want to attach the event listener to is called trigger. So there we go. So we've got our Joker set up there. And next we could use Joker, the Joker object, add event listener, and the event that we're going to listen for is a click, and whenever it gets clicked, let's call it load joke. So we'll fire off the function load joke. So next we need to create that function. So load joke, and this is where our AJAX will get loaded. So first, let's create our AJAX. We can give it a variable name. We'll call it AJAX. So new XML HTTP request object. So create a brand new one. And now let's listen for the ready state change. So on ready state change, we fire off a function. And then within this function, we're gonna we have the two conditions. So the first one is, you can also use this if you want. So this as well, it will be referring to the current object. So you could do this ready state and check to see if it's equal to 4. And if it is, then let's do another condition in here. So do it slightly different here within this format. You can combine them in one statement as well. So we check to make sure status is 200. And if everything is a go, then we're ready to output our content. So let's just console log it out for now, and we'll do this response text. And before we try this out, there is one other thing that we need to do, and we need to provide the URL for the API. So that URL is just over here, random joke. So just you can go to it within your browser as well. We're referring to the do open. So that's where we can paste our URL. So open it up bigger so we can take a closer look at it. We're also going to do it true, and we need to specify the method. So it's going to be via get, comma, separate that out, and then of course we need to send it to initiate that sending of the content. So there we go. So now we're ready to try this out in our browser. So go back to the browser, refresh, and I've got the inspector open, and there we go. So we're getting our joke. It's being returned back. So notice it's being returned back as text. So we need to parse it through and update it and send it out as JSON. You can also do this response as well. So you can see that we're getting all of that information back the same way. So we've got to take this object and we've got to parse it as JSON. So let's open up our editor and we call it JSON. So we're going to use the JSON parse method, and what this does is this will parse a string and turn it into an object so we can actually make use of it. Because otherwise it's just one giant string and we can see it, but we can't do a whole lot with it in our JavaScript. And we want to be able to output different parts of the object. So there we go. So we've got our joke, and I'll make this a little bit smaller. So every time I click it, I get a brand new joke. There's also, if you go over to your network part, you can see that if you go in your XHR that we're making several calls here. So make it a little bit bigger. So every time I click it, we can see that this is getting initiated. So you can also see, and you can make sure that your XHR request is firing off. If you're having any problems, you can always dig down deeper into what's actually happening by opening up your developer console, developer tools, and you can see what's happening within the network. And you can also isolate out different parts of what's happening within your network. And in this case, we're doing XHR requests. So the XHR and fetch will get listed here, and we can see the type. We can see that where it's being initiated. We can see what is the name, the server value, and the time that it took to respond. So all of that looks like it's working perfectly. So now we can dig down into this object that we're retrieving, and we can make some use of it. So let's do that. We see that we've got URL, we've got a value, and the value is where the joke is contained. We've also got an icon URL, so we can actually place an image in there as well. So let's do that now, and let's update our output to contain that returned information. So document, and we'll do query selector as well. So there's a number of ways to make your selection. So query selector, and we're selecting our output. And we want to update that inner HTML. And I'm going to create another variable so that we can see it a little bit better. We'll create a variable called HTML. And then within here, so this is where we're going to make use of our object that's being returned. So let's write out some HTML. So place it within a div, and then within this div, so those are single quotes that I'm using. I do tend to use single quotes when I am creating my JavaScript string values, just because oftentimes I will use double quotes within the strings, but you can use double quotes as well. So it's up to whatever your preference is. So JSON, and let's go back and double check in the console. So it should be JSON.value. And let's try this one out and see if we're getting something showing up there. So we are getting a response. We're outputting it there. We also, maybe we want to pull back and we want to get that image URL. So let's add that one in as well. Image source, and this is where I'm using the double quotes. Go back in and let's refresh so I can see what we're actually outputting there. So no, this is obviously not an image. I just want to double check and see that it's icon URL. So let's go back in here and update the source of our image to be correct. So it's icon URL, not value. Save. Go back out and let's try it one more time. So get joke, and there we go. So we've got bunch of jokes that are coming in. We're getting our images. So what I want you to do now, try this out for yourself. So open up your editor and connect to the Chuck Norris API and output that content coming from the API onto your web page. And this is going to be a good practice exercise to get more familiar with working with various APIs and how they're responding on the data object that gets returned. So next, we're going to be looking at another way to do this, and we're going to be using fetch. So that's coming up next.